Welcome. Thank you for joining us on our Excel training. It is the second session in our Excel series presented by BIS Facility in association with Probita Training. I'm Yvonne Rousseau, and I will be your presenter for today's training, looking at exploring and creating formulas in Excel and everything that goes along with that. We're quickly going to run through the agenda for our session today, and then I am going to switch over to Excel. So please note, yes, we do have the slides, but the slides are more for your purpose as well, just to keep track of where we are. The session itself will be taking place in Excel 100%. There's no use for me to jump between the slides and Excel if I can just explain everything in Excel from the start. So just quickly running through the agenda, what's our objective for today? What is the idea behind the training today? To work in Excel, specifically looking at formulas. For those of you who may have attended the first session, it dealt with the basic principles of Excel and formatting your data. Today we're going to look at if I already have data in Excel. How can I use the formulas to work with that data to provide certain meaningful answers? We will also look at some other options within Excel using formulas, like duplicating formulas, copy pasting, dragging it around, well, copy and pasting by dragging, and then using your relative and absolute references in your formulas to ensure that you get the right answer that you are looking for. We will also look at something called flash fill. It's not really a formula in Excel, but it is quite a very good tool for data processing. Flash fill, unfortunately, is only applicable on the latest Excel template, so the 2013 and later. If you're using anything before 2013, you may find that flash fill will not work. Also, with regards to the formulas, if you are using older versions of Excel, the formulas in Excel may look different. Not the answer, but the naming convention for the formula. They have changed their naming conventions in the later versions. So please just take note of that as well. So once we are looking at the formulas, we're going to look at a few specific ones, some number functions dealing with amounts, some text functions, and some financial functions. If there is anything, unfortunately, we only have 2 hours. It's a 2-hour session. So we're going to look at basic functions and formulas. We're not going to go into very detailed advanced like your if and your VLOOKUP and those type of things. But if you do perhaps have a question, I really don't mind to answer it. So as we go through these formulas, or at the end, if you have a question about specific, maybe more advanced formulas, please do let me know, and then we will take a look at that. So just with regards to the objective of today, it is more for people who have either just started using Excel with regards to formulas, or who needs a refresher on how formulas work, or who maybe has used Excel for quite a long time but are never too sure about the formulas. As I said, we're not going to go into advanced. There are thousands of formulas in Excel and ways to do calculations, and it can take you a week to try and go through all of them in detail depending on what level you are. So today it's all about just looking at the fundamentals, the basics of Excel, and the basics of formulas. On that note, then I am going to go into the Excel document. So the Excel document that we have provided you with, as I did explain, it is also the document we're going to use for our examples today. And the first thing really that I think we do need to explain in Excel is the difference between what we call and of course I will not be able to do my little drawings because I see this document is read only. I apologize. I just quickly want to see if I save it with another name, if I will be able to actually edit it. Okay, I think I will be able to do that now. No, because otherwise we're going to have some trouble for me to actually do the examples. Okay, there we go. So the first thing that is important in Excel if you are looking at calculations is to understand the difference between what we know as a formula in Excel and what we know as a function. At the end of the day, they basically do exactly the same thing, and they are basically the same thing. But a formula is a calculation that you do yourself. So your own calculation that you go and do in Excel. For example, I go and I send in a cell and I say equals 1 plus 2. Right? That's a calculation or a formula. I've created a formula in Excel, and Excel will give me the answer. A function, on the other hand, is where Excel have already created pre-populated, not pre-populated, but let's say pre-created or template calculations. So if you wanted to calculate an average or the sum of a range of items or the average, sorry, I did say average, the maximum in a range of numbers or the minimum in a range of numbers. So there are pre-created templates for calculations in Excel. And then you just have to give Excel the details, and then Excel will do the calculation for you. And you don't have to go and say equals 1 plus 2 plus 5 plus 7 plus 20 divided by 6 to get your average. You just have to tell Excel what the data is, and Excel will automatically do the calculation for you. So that's the two options you have. Either create your own, which of course we use most of the times just for normal add, divide, subtract, those type of things. But if we want to do a specific mathematical calculation or a logical calculation or a financial calculation, Excel has the pre-templated options to do so. And that you will find in your ribbon at the top. For those of you who are not sure what your ribbon is, it is this lovely space at the top of Excel with all the options, all the menu options. So within that, you will have to go to the formula ribbon. So today we are mostly going to work in the formula ribbon. Some of the formulas have shortcuts, like your AutoSum does have a shortcut under your home ribbon. So whether you're sitting in the home ribbon or whether you are sitting in the formula ribbon, you will see the AutoSum. But when I'm working with formulas, it's just easier for me to say in the formula tab, because then I know where everything is and where to find it. Now, number one, if we are creating our own calculations in Excel, we don't actually need the formula ribbon at the top. Right? Not going to help us. We just need to know what we want to do, and we need to do that. So, for instance, if I want to calculate an addition of amounts, I will start my calculation, and calculations always have to be started with an equal sign. That's very important. Right, so you just need to know the rules in Excel. I will start my calculation with an equal sign, and then I will do my calculation. 890 plus 600. That's the two items I want to add, and Excel will give me the answer. Now, very important in Excel, whether you're using your own calculations or whether you're using the Excel functions, is that you try and use the data in Excel. So you try and reference to the data in Excel rather than typing it in. For instance, that's what I did now. Let me just zoom in. I understand that on a webinar, you may have a smaller screen than I do. So let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. So hovering over that cell or being in that cell, I can see exactly what I've done. I've decided I want to add the data in cell D16 with the data in cell D23. Right. Now, I have seen people literally doing the following. They also want to add the 890 with the 600. Then they will go equals 800 plus 890 plus 600. It's not wrong, right? You will get the same answer. But the problem is this answer is dependent on other data. Should the other data change, so should my amount of 890 change back to 700, down or up, my answer is now fixed because I put an actual amount in there rather than referencing to the data in Excel. So if my underlying data changes, my answer will not change. But if I did what I did in my first calculation, and I've actually referenced to the cell where the data is in, should my data then change, my answer will also change. So at the end of the day, my answer will be correct. So whether you are using a calculation, your own, or whether you are using a function in Excel, please, if at all possible, try and use the information, the data in your Excel worksheet. Try and reference to the cells where the data are in. You're allowed to jump over sheets as well. That's possible. So I can even in this sheet, I can go and say, I would like to add that 275 together with an amount in another sheet, with that 325,000 for whatever reason. Sometimes it happens that calculation needs to go over sheets, especially if you have a sheet where you're doing a summary of all the other sheets. And what is nice now is that now my calculation will remember where the information is coming from. So should I later change the underlying information, I know my answer will be correct. And I don't have to go back and check the answer and recalculate to identify if I still have the right answer. So that's a very, very important principle, is always try to have the underlying data in the Excel that you use in the calculation rather than typing it in. Unless you're only going to use that amount once and never again, and it's not going to change. Then by all means type it in. There's nothing wrong with typing it in, but it is preferable to use the data that is given to you. That's the first rule. The second rule is remember to follow in any calculation you do in Excel, whether it is your own written calculation or a function. Remember to follow the normal mathematical rules of what comes first. Right? Brackets comes before certain things. So if you want a calculation to be done first, put it in brackets. Then you have your of. Right? Those it's almost like a division, but not really. A quarter of 10. A fifth of 2. That's your ofs. Then D is for division, M is for multiplication, A is for addition, and lastly subtraction. So if you're creating a calculation, a multiplication will always happen before a subtraction, no matter where it is in your calculation. So the normal mathematical rules must still be followed. Please remember that. And then the third item. So 1 was try to reference to the data. 2, try to remember your mathematical rules. For those of you who don't know the mathematical rule of BOTMAS, I would suggest you go and read a bit up on it. It's really not that difficult. And then number 3, remember your operators. For those of you following on the slides, the operators are sitting on slide number 10. Right, so what is an operator? An operator is the characters that are used in Excel to build a calculation. For instance, like I've already said, to start a calculation, you must start with an equal sign. Well, you can start with a plus sign or a minus sign. So if I say equals 1 plus 2, I'm going to get 3. If I say plus 1 plus 2, I'll get 3. If I say minus 1 plus 2, of course, I won't get 3, I'll get 1, but it will still give me an answer. So the plus and the minus sign can also be used to start your calculation, but I would suggest always start with the equal sign, because if you start with the negative sign, you're going to have an issue where your calculation and your answer may be incorrect. Right. So equal sign to start. Then we have our other normal operators. A plus is for addition, right? A minus is for subtraction. It's very easy. A little star would be your multiplication sign. Please don't use the X, it's actually the star. And the forward slash or dash or whatever it is that they call it nowadays will be your division. And then we also have a percentage sign. If you want to change an amount, let me just delete that because it's trying to do a calculation. If you want to change an amount to a percentage, right, you can put in the percentage sign. What does that mean? If I use this in a calculation, it will actually be seen as a 0.1, not as 10. So if I say 100 times by the 10%, I'm actually saying 100 times by 0.1. Okay, so that's the percentage character. And then the other thing is if you are using text in any calculation in Excel, a calculation, the moment you put an equal sign in front of your calculation, Excel wants you to work with numbers, right? Because you cannot multiply text. You cannot add text. Well, there are ways of adding text together in a string, but you're not going to get an answer. So if you want to use text within your calculations, always give it little quotation marks before the text and after the text. If you don't, your answer will give you an error. So if you do get an error in a formula or a calculation in which you have text, the first thing is to just go and check those quotation marks. It just tells Excel that there is text. And then usually what needs to happen in calculations where you do put text in is that a specific answer should trigger a specific text to be displayed. There are a few more other operators that we will look at in a moment when we get to actually using Excel functions, but these are the most important. So the normal plus, minus, multiply, divisions, and then for text, put them in quotation marks. Okay. I'm not going to go into detail in terms of creating your own formulas. I'm sure everybody understands how that works. It's exactly like typing on a calculator. You start with an equal, you type your calculation, 1 plus 2 minus 8 multiplied by 6 divided by 9. Remember the BODMAS rules though. If you want the addition to happen before the multiplication, you will have to put it in brackets. Otherwise it won't. And then you will get your answer, which mine is a percentage since I made that cell a percentage cell. Okay. So building your own calculation, straightforward, quick and easy, nothing difficult about that. What I want to get to today really is your functions. And then when I have created a calculation, how I can copy and paste that calculation and make sure that it is still correct. So the functions in Excel, here are all the different types. You can either click on Insert Function in your ribbon. And I would suggest if it's the first time you're going to start to use functions in Excel, this may be the way to go. So instead of typing the function yourself, go and find it and use the dialog box. You can type a function, right? If you know the function, if you know exactly what you want, you can start typing it. Equals sum. And Excel will give it to you. You will see Excel will actually give you a few suggestions of what functions includes the sum function. So let's say I just want sum. The next rule, if you are working with a function, is that you always have to put in a bracket. So after you've told Excel which function you want, you will start your bracket. And then Excel will ask you, okay, what data do you want to sum together? So you will see it will ask you number 1, number 2, number 3, and so on and so forth. I can now go and select different ones. I can say I want 65, but then I also want the 75. So I'm going to say 65, comma, Then it will ask me, okay, where's your second number? So that's a separator that we call in Excel. I use the comma to separate my data in this calculation. Just watch out, your separator may not be the same as mine. It just depends on your settings on your computer. Yours may be a full stop, yours may be a semicolon. So when you start to create a calculation, and not in the dialog box, I'll show you in a moment. If you go through the dialog box, it's actually, the process looks a little bit different. But if you're typing it in yourself, Excel will tell you what to use as a separator. You will actually see Excel has a little comma there for me in this example at the bottom. So on your side, if you don't have a comma, use whatever you have. So comma 75, comma 75. Let's say that's the 3 I want to add. I'll close my brackets and I will say enter, and it will give me the answer. Of course, if I want to add a range of data, I can highlight the data from top to bottom. I don't have to go and click on every single one. So if I want to sum a range of data that's all connected, this is taking too long. Especially you can now imagine if I have data that is 300 lines long. So you don't have to do that. You can then just highlight. So once again, I said sum, and now I'm going to highlight all the cells I want to sum together. And I'm going to say enter. And that will then give me the answer I am looking for. So that's just quickly creating. Sum is really the easiest function to talk about in terms of creating it. Every function may look different depending on the type of information that you have to provide Excel to get that function to work. So that's why I said if you are working with a new function, rather go through the function dialog box, type in what you are looking for, let's say average. Wait. It will give you once again all the options that may include the average function. You can click on the one you want, and then Excel will ask you where's the figures, where's the data set. And now once again, you can either go and click on individual cells, or you can highlight more than one cell at the same time. If you do highlight more than one cell at the same time, it will take the average of all of those cells. What it will also do in the dialog box is it will give you a little answer, so you can actually check, is this calculation working? And it will also give you an explanation of what this calculation does. Returns the average of its arguments. So if you are working with a new function and it's a difficult function, let's say something like VLOOKUP, if we wanted to go more advanced, I'm not going to go into that today, but just quickly to explain my point. If it's the first time you do it, you may first want to use the dialog box, because the dialog box explains to you exactly what information you need to provide. So you will see the dialog box. If I'm sitting in lookup value, at the bottom it will tell me this is the value to be found in the first column of the table and can be a value, a reference, or a text string. Whereas if I just typed VLOOKUP into my Excel, there's no, well, I can click on the item to get an explanation, but then it's, guys, it doesn't do that for me today. But it's a bit more difficult. You need to know the function if you want to just type it in yourself in Excel. So those are the two ways of inserting functions. Either type it out if you know the function, or if you're not too sure, use the insert function, because that will actually take you through the process, explain to you what inputs are necessary, show you what your answer is, and actually it will also warn you if there will be an error. So if the answer may not be calculated correctly, or there's information missing, or whatever the case may be. If you're not sure about what calculations is available in Excel, you will see there is quite a lot. You have financial functions, so financial calculations that has already been calculated. You have logical, you have text, you have time and date, you have lookup and reference, mathematical calculations, and more. Statistical, engineering, cube, information. I have to be honest, I don't even use a tenth of the functions that Excel provides in my day-to-day use of Excel. So there's really a lot of them. If you're not sure, if you want to do something in Excel and you think there should be a simpler way of doing it, Excel probably has already implemented the simpler way through a function. Go and Google. Go onto Google and say, I would like to do the following in Excel. And if the option is there, Google will tell you how and when and all of that. Okay, we are going to go through a few main ones today, of course. But that's just what we need to know before we start.